Parenting, manliness, marriage, fitness, and finance. Nothing's off limits. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us tonight on another episode of Surf Turk After Dark. So join me as my co-host Adam, as always. And how are you doing this evening, Adam? Any exciting adventures in scuba diving, snorkeling, Master and Commander lifestyle?
No, not this week. I'm a little feeling a little blue, Dan. I'm a little down in the dumps. I had a meeting with a literary agent. It did not go the way I wanted, so I'm a little bummed out. But I'm going to rally. I'll be okay by tomorrow.
I'm sure this conversation will bring you right out of it, no doubt. I mean, it's just so high quality that it's bound to just to surge you up. But no, tell me about this, man. Literary agents. I would say most people's engagements with them are mostly bad most of the time. But what happened?
Oh, so I should start by saying I don't know. The only thing I know about the literary agent side is just, watching podcasts, listening to podcasts from dozens of agents at this point. So that's really I don't have any inside understanding of what they're dealing with. But from the writer side, it's a very, on the fiction side, it's a very grim process. So, and I guess I should say not everybody, there are definitely people that just get in and it's like, yeah, I queried 2 agents and it was all good. And I got it, represented it and somebody bought my book and it's amazing. But I think those are the exceptions that prove the rule. So, I just have I won't bore you with the long saga of trying to get an agent. I got an agent, lost the agent. But anyways, I had an encouraging meeting going into it. And then it just, it did not go the way I wanted because, my book has been submitted to some editors. And so I think agents are reluctant to take on a book that's already been out exposed to editors. So I'm a little bummed out, but
it's tainted. It's a tainted book now.
It is tainted. Yes.
It's tainted. It's been touched by mortal hands and therefore
been soiled. Yes, it's been soiled. So, but it's a very,
horrible,
it may be harder. It may be harder to get an agent than a lot of other things that we do in life. It's than to get into Harvard. I think the acceptance rate for Harvard is probably better than the acceptance rate for agents. But I think I've seen some analysis to that effect, but it's challenging. But but when you write, you just keep going. You just keep writing.
I would love. Well, I think we've talked it offline a couple of times, but I would love to talk through the differences between traditional publishing and indie publishing. I self-publish everything I do. I know you've gone the traditional publishing route. I think it would be fun to contrast that somewhat. But for the purpose of this episode, that's actually a really amazing setup. And actually, we didn't even pregame that, but we're talking today about mental and emotional health, right? So we've been talking the last couple of weeks about risk. We kind of really went general with it. And last week we really tried to wicker it down and say, all right, let's just apply it to parenting. Let's look at the ways we would like our kids to grow up and then look at the risks that would negatively impact those kind of efforts. So if we broke parenting down into trying to set up our kids for physical success, mental, emotional success, spiritual success, financial and social success, and then we said, well, what do we want to accomplish for your kids? What do we want them to get out of that? And then what are the risks, that they could face, as they try to, achieve those ends? And what risks do we as parents have too? We obviously hit physical risk heavily last week. I think it's a really comfortable subject for us. We talk physical risk professionally for decades. But now we're talking physical and emotional risk. And when I think of what I want my kids to achieve mentally and emotionally, I want them to be well-educated, mentally flexible. I want them to find what they care about in life. And then I want them to be resilient, right? I want them to be able to face challenge and overcome it, not just physically, because we talk a lot about adversity and overcoming it, but what you're just talking about is a very non-physical form of adversity, and the ability to kind of get back on the horse and do that, even though you're just getting kicked in the dick repeatedly, is huge. And what an amazing skill that is. But I mean, do you feel that way about it?
Yes. Well, yeah. For me personally, as an adult, yeah, it's, I think everybody comes to writing from different places, right? And they have different goals. So I think it depends on, what your goals are. Some people want to be traditionally published and that's their mark of, success. I take the tack. I'm already a writer. I'm already writing. So I'm self-actualized in that sense. I don't have to be traditionally published, but I've been trying to go through the process. But it's just like when I run the numbers, it's very like, I could have probably written another book in the amount of time that I've spent querying, because I've queried 147 agents, and that is like, I searched like 300, right? Because you're not just, just an agent is not like for any book, right? Like it's like matchmaking, right? Like, so you have to find agents that are in the wheelhouse of the genre and the type of book, and that takes a lot of research. So, of those 147, I researched a lot more, and then you're trying to individually tailor the queries to each of them. So it's challenging. And you're dealing with the rejection, but I think, part of that is like, I'm like, cool. Cause that's just part of the path of being a writer, is like getting rejected for like 98% of the things you do. So like
thumbs downs, negative reviews, and rejection.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
So I think like the fact that I'm getting rejected is actually like a sign of that I'm progressing, right? Like I'm not like on the outside looking in. I'm like in the arena, just getting kicked in the testicles over and over again.
Teddy Roosevelt, right? You're straight up. You're the man in the arena. You are the man in the arena.
Yeah. But, so it just, it definitely, it still stings, but you just got to kind of, hey, keep moving forward. And it's not all bad, it's like, people are definitely giving me good feedback. So I'm on the right track. But it's challenging. So I think, what do I do personally? You have to reframe things. I think that's the biggest thing with mental adversity, is reframe it and then realize, you're going to get stronger from it. As a result of going through that adversity, it'll give you additional frames of reference for the future. And what else is good about, really just putting it in perspective that, all the hard things you go through, will make the good things that much better. And they equip you with that resilience to move through life.
What's like the first peanut butter sandwich you eat after Ranger School? It's the best peanut butter sandwich you've ever eaten in your life, because you just spent, 2 months eating basically nothing, and certainly nothing that tastes good. So it just, all that adversity, all that negative, it just makes the positive that much better. I mean, is that kind of where we're going? Is that what you're like? Well, let's just reframe it. Let's say it's just setting the conditions for an even greater win when you finally get it.
So that's part of it. But I think the prevailing, while you're getting, what's the Rocky, it's like, you keep moving, get hit and keep moving forward. It's like that I think is the more important thing. You're developing the tools to deal with setbacks. And then it's nice, because I can model that for my kids, and I can be like, yeah, this happened. It died on submission the first time it went out. That sucks. I'm sad. I'm bummed out, but that's part of life. Like, you got to deal with that stuff.
100%. It's definitely part of life. Now, what you really need, though, is you need a montage, right? Like, you need a montage that will just take you through all of this and get you out the other end. Because you mentioned Rocky.
True.
What would a Rocky movie be without this great montage of, I suck at the beginning, but I get to the end of it and it's amazing. And because I'm a movie character, it really only costs me 3 or 4 minutes and maybe a bad 80s song, and all of a sudden I can do anything. I can
save an amazing 80s song.
Or an amazing 80s song. Yes, exactly. Like Karate Kid, we could be the
you're the best around.
What is it?
Yeah.
You're the best around, 100%. Or you could be Ernest Saves Camp. You could be like Ernest Worrell saving camp. You could rebuild the whole thing. You got all kinds of options with a montage. I feel like you should line one of those up. I don't know if you could swing that.
Okay, I'm gonna give some thought to that later on tonight. Like, what would be my montage song?
I don't know. And then you can create it. And the problem is you have to actually live through the montage. It's
there'd be a lot of synth wave. There'd be a lot of just
like
a lot of
Kung
electronic.
Fury. You look like the Kung Fury show. Is that pretty much what it would play out like?
Or like this. Yeah, the Stranger
montage.
The Stranger Things score, like the intro opening music.
Man. classic stuff. But no, all jokes aside, what you just described to me is if one of my kids walked up to me and said, Dad, I've been having a lot of trouble with this thing. I've been working on it for a year or two. I'm really struggling with it, but I know that it's what I want to do. So I've not kind of wavered indecisively and not known kind of where I wanted to go. I know the direction I want to get. I've researched it thoroughly. I've queried, I've dug into this list of 300 different people, and I thought, okay, 147 are really worth my time. I've dug in with these guys. So you've done the thought, the research, you've pulled the trigger, you've hit a couple of obstacles. You're kind of pushing through that. I mean, to me, that's like what I want my kids to do. Like that, if my kids come back with that, like, good job, son, because you're nailing it. And I'm not trying to, say you're my son. I think we're about the same age. So that would be weird. I'm just, I'm drawing a parallel. Like it's
I get it. But the problem is like, you and I have just had some living, so we understand that skill acquisition just takes a lot of work. Sure, there's probably some things that you're naturally good at, but most things like humans are just going to suck at for a while, and it's painful.
That's true.
And you just got to put in the reps to get better. But like when you're a kid, you're like, oh, that was hard. Like, I want to stop doing it. I don't want to do it anymore.
That's true too. And actually, I think to a degree it's genetic. So, my wife told me about a study in rats. So we both have this problem where we'll have something bad happen, but then a week later we'll do the same thing because we just somehow expect it to be different. And so I think genetically, some people are just predisposed. Like some rats will go up to food and they'll get shocked randomly. Back to our scientists are weird discussion, but they'll get shocked randomly and then they'll never go to the food again. They're like, oh, that's horrible. I get shocked every third time I eat the food. I'm never going to eat this food again. Other rats will eat the food, get shocked, have a moment, a few days. They'll come back and do it again and get shocked again. Some rats never learn. They're the rats that just never learn. They always get the food. They get shocked. They never seem to figure out they're going to get shocked. There's optimists. I don't know if that's an optimist gene. I don't know if it's a dumb gene.
Or they like
but
the
I have
food.
it too.
Yeah. They like the food more than they don't like the shock.
Maybe it's an S&M gene. Maybe they just like the shock too. I don't know if they control for that. Like maybe it's, I don't know. I'm not an expert on rats and what gets them their jollies, but what you're describing to me in part, like all of our experience of like, I guess, hard living, a lot of it has to do with the fact that you don't give up, maybe because you're either kind of too dumb or too optimistic to believe that this is unachievable. And so you just kind of keep stumbling through it. Weirdly, I think it's a positive attribute.
There is something to be said for a little bit of delusional thinking. Because, there's a lot of
vision. Call it vision if we're nice.
Because I think if people really knew how long and painful processes were, they may not undertake them. So it's helpful to be a little bit delusional in the beginning.
Or how long the odds are, right? Or exactly how long the odds of success on some of these things are. You're like, well, if you just played the odds, you probably never try half the things that I think we've accomplished. Like, and honestly, if you just said, well, it's unlikely, it's really unlikely, there's no reason for me to bother. I mean, honestly, I don't play the lottery. I don't play the lottery because I think the odds are so slim that it's never going to happen and it's just foolish to spend the money on it. Other people feel differently. I guess they're even more optimistic than me. They're like, well, the odds are really long. Yeah. I got this vision. I'm going to achieve it.
I mean, I've always considered the lottery like the quote unquote fool's tax, just because it's so statistically improbable. But I know somebody, like a friend of the family, that won like a couple $1 million. So, but I think that's kind of a random. I think that's like, the plural of anecdote is not data.
It's funny. Actually, man, this is a total tangent. I have started to. Okay, we've talked about the difficulty in sussing out what you can trust and what you can't. Right? We had a discussion about that not too long ago. It's difficult to decide, but the one thing. And this is almost taking us back to like the pre-scientific days. The one thing I can generally trust is the anecdote if I'm the person that observed it or who observed it. And so it's funny, right? The plural of anecdotes doesn't necessarily produce data, right? Multiple anecdotes don't produce data, but sometimes if you have no way to verify the data anyway, and you don't have faith that the data being presented is accurate, then isn't plurality of anecdotes the best you got?
So, yes. I mean, I think what you're bringing up is, different. different sense making frameworks. And, if you, I guess if we took like seatbelts and we're like, yeah, like I've never known anybody that like, we didn't have seatbelts 40 years ago. Like we're good. We were good then.
Maybe you got
like,
the wrong anecdotes, right? That's the risk, is that you didn't get any of the right anecdotes.
So,
like, oops.
But I mean, yes, you do have like, I think then you're getting into like, kind of folk wisdom where it's like, hey, let's avoid X, Y, and Z behavior, or let's do, X, Y, and Z behavior because it ends up being good. Like, don't go to bed angry with at your spouse. It's like, can you go to bed angry? Yeah, absolutely. Like, have I done it? Yeah, absolutely. But like in general, like we should probably not go to bed angry at our spouse because that like is just going to breed like long-term, bad situations.
Yeah, like John Wayne Bobby. Total blast from the past there, but don't go to sleep angry.
Just throwing out
or it might go really south. It might go really south. But no, I mean, we're joking about anecdotes and we're joking about not trusting data, but the truth is that what you're talking about, folk wisdom, was, in a sense, accumulated anecdote in kind of the pre-scientific method and pre-peer-reviewed process. And so it's not like it's without value. It's just, I guess what we hope is that there's a standard attached to, let's say, peer-reviewed data that raises the bar so that even if you don't know the old wife who's talking to you, in theory, the kind of what they're presenting has credibility that you can trust. I mean, that's the hope of the system. Like that's the strength of the institution, right?
Well, and and people like Nassim Taleb, who did Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, he'll talk about like, grandmother wisdom. It's definitely like that stuff has been like battle tested by, decades, centuries of
millennia,
of vetting.
Sometimes millennia.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you definitely have to weight that when you're, thinking about, how you're going to conduct yourself.
Yes. I mean, that's the sweet spot, right? I mean, people talk common sense, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people. People talk folk wisdom, and people kind of balance that against science. Like it's somehow maybe one against the other. I don't really see it that way, right? I mean, to me, it becomes kind of a burden of proof issue. Like just internally, how I use the metric is, okay, if you tell me a thing and it kind of bears out with my own experience. Okay, so I have this collection of anecdotes that, basically comprises my experience. If what I see or what you tell me jives with that, then the burden of proof is relatively low, right? And that's like, okay, well, if you tell me about this thing called gravity, learned about it in like third grade, it matches exactly what my experience is. And so, okay, well, yeah, that's a pretty easy one to buy. Now, if you say something that's the opposite of my perceived experience, I'm not saying it's not true, and I'm not saying you shouldn't ever accept it. It's just the burden of proof is going to necessarily be higher because, well, all of a sudden you're telling me something that's the opposite of what I think. And so an opposite of what I've observed. I mean, presumably most of us are reasonable enough that we compile our observations and draw conclusions. So I think that sometimes gets people into trouble where they're too quick to either throw out something that disagrees with their own experience, or they're too quick to accept it just because a quote unquote expert has told them. But I mean, really, I think we just should be judicious.
Yes. And that leads into Jonathan Haidt, who is somebody I want to talk about today. One of his earlier books, The Righteous Mind, which was about politics. Mm-hmm. And he says, when we're confronted with a fact that, or a situation that agrees with our biases or our priors, we're going to look for any scrap of anything we can agree with, right? And we're going to, oh, well, that was real, or that happened, that was good. But if it doesn't agree with our priors, then we're going to look for any little element to dismiss the entire thing. Like, oh, well, that didn't count because of whatever.
So true. So true. Oh, so true. No, you're 100% right, right? I mean, you open up Fox and you open up CNN, or pick your two news channels that have slightly different flavors, and you see it all the time, right? You'll see the same data with a functionally opposite spin. And that's just, people have certainly learned to play on people's tendency to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think what we're describing, this whole kind of the meta of what we're talking about here, is really one of the things that as parents, we're hoping to instill in our kids. The ability to be discriminate and flexible in terms of like, well, I can take in information. I cannot jump to conclusions. right? Like the Phantom Toll Booth teaches us, it's really hard to come back from conclusions once you jump there. But yeah, not jump to conclusions, but also not to just totally dither and never be able to pull the trigger. Like, so the ability to kind of cast that net out, collect data, collect observations, talk to people, experience things, and then draw conclusions from it, but then not be so bound to those conclusions that you can never change them if the circumstances change. I mean, I don't even quite know how to define that or what word I would use to describe it, but that's one of the things I want my kids to be able to do.
So I would say discernment, it's this ability to, because you have to have like a bullshit detector, because you've got to be able to take in, and kids today are like, they're seeing stuff online, they're seeing stuff at school, they're seeing stuff here, there, everywhere. So they've got to be able to parse that stuff out. And a lot of it, unfortunately, just doesn't come until you've had some bad experiences and you've been like burned or fooled by something. So then the goal is to have them learn lessons that aren't so severe that they're kind of like permanently damaged by them.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's okay to look dumb, and it's okay to be embarrassed, and it's okay to have to eat your words and walk something back. In fact, there's a lot of character to be built through that. Like, it's okay to be wrong, and as long as you can assess the data, realize you were wrong, and then frankly, just apologize. Like, hey, my bad. I was way off on that. Especially if something got hostile. We obviously want people to be able to do that. But it is easier said than done. I mean, one of the risks, I think, of that whole process is that, on the one hand, there's this risk that your kids will become overly dogmatic, right? Like, all right, I'm team red, I'm team blue. I'm going all the way with it. Everything anybody else says is wrong. I'm in on this. And anything that contradicts that is so hostile, is so, I guess, threatening to my worldview that I can't even consider it. I have to immediately discount it. And what we've seen even more lately is I also have to just vilify the person who said it. And you're like, well, that to me is one of the huge risks. And unfortunately, it's kind of common right now, right? I mean, how do we mitigate that risk?
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do because, like you said, you get caught in where you're associating your sense of identity with the belief. And when that happens, you are
an ego.
You don't want to let that thing go, because to let it go is to like discredit yourself. So it's hard to, I think Farnham Street is this guy, Shane Paris, but he talks about like strong opinions held loosely, something like that. But basically, like, you want to have like some opinions and ideas about the world, but you also want to be able to pivot from them if the situation, the feedback you're getting from the world is indicating that this is probably not a good way to go. And then in terms of being wrong, really just owning up to it is the easiest way to do it. I think you've probably seen plenty of times in a debrief, somebody screwed something up and like they're either like doubling down and like defending what they did, and it just makes it awkward for everybody, or they're just like, yeah, hey, like I fucked that up, sorry, and like, and then you just like move on.
And you see it all the time, though, right? When folks, we all do it. We've all done it at least some point in our life, when you just double down on it, and then you double down, and it's painfully obvious to everyone else that this is clearly a solved issue and you're on the wrong side of it, but you just can't. Like, you're just too invested and you can't let it go. And that, does anything feel dumber? Like when you walk out, you're like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. But even then, it's never too late to just be like, hey, I'm an idiot. I don't know what's going on. I was just stuck on that, and man, I'm stupid. And then boom, it's done, right? You can clean your hands of it.
So it just takes a lot of emotional maturity, and I see it I saw it in the SEAL teams, because when you're a new SEAL, like obviously when you get there from buds, like you're a new guy. That whole first 2 years, you're basically a new guy. And then after that period, we call you a one cruise wonder, right? So that's like years 3 and 4. You're a one cruise wonder. And then you're a 2 cruise know-it-all. So you've done two cycles and you think you know everything. And people get tied to like, oh, like I've been here 1 cycle longer than you. I have to be right and you're wrong, because I've been here longer.
Yeah.
And
Seniority and rank, right? Military's bad about that.
My favorite thing was when I would see guys make that transition to, they'd be able to say, you know what, I screwed that up. And then they would just be curious. And then they wouldn't be afraid to ask questions during debriefs. And it was a cool transition to see because they're developing the maturity and the like confidence in themselves that they're not threatened by looking stupid.
And we all have to get there, right? We all have to get to that point in our own lives because I think mostly in most situations I'm there. I mean, occasionally you still like, I got to look smart, but mostly I feel like I'm there. But that's hard to get to. Now, to avoid that risk, though, to specifically mitigate it, I think one thing I try to provide for my kids, and this may sound sometimes it sounds kind of jerky, right? But I want to be the sounding board that will always tell them, like, hey, man, what you're saying is wrong, or at least you might want to reconsider that because it's dead wrong. It's whatever the opposite of truth to power is, because obviously your kids aren't power. I mean, you have to do that to people in power positions too, but you also got to do it to your kids. But part of that mitigation is making sure that in your life, honestly, to this day, you have people willing to say that to you, right? You are willing to say it to the people you trust and are friends with, but you got to make sure that you're willing to listen to it from other people, because if you will, I mean, you don't want to get silly about it. You don't need to listen to every stranger on the internet, but you should have trusted people who you can say, hey, man, you're screwed up here, bud. And you're like, oh, man, I trust your opinion. I got to relook this.
So, yeah, a couple things on that. So the first part is we all have blind spots. So we all inherently, like, I am going to minimize all the stupid things I do and bad things I do and maximize all the great and heroic things I do, right? Because my self-image is just naturally
of course we're going to do that.
Well, it's just my self-image is just naturally warped because I don't want to think of myself as like the jerk that like cut somebody off in traffic or whatever. But that's the importance of like having like a partner, you know, in our spouses and close friends, because they can see your blind spots a lot better than you can, and they can call them out. And then number two, with your kids, you're overlooking what I call information laundering, which is they can't hear it from you because inherently what you say is wrong.
Yeah.
So they have to hear it from like their coach or like someone else. They're like, hey, Dad, I heard X. And you're like, bro, I told you that 2 weeks ago. And they're like, no, but the coach said this.
This is different. He said it totally different than you in a way that was far superior to the way that you said that. In fact, you probably didn't even say that. You're probably just imagining you did because you're an old man. No, it is so sad, but it's also true, right? You've got to be willing to do that. You've got to have those people in your life. And we hope to instill that in our kids. I think mostly we try to. But what's the flip side of that? The flip side of the entire thing, right? Okay, we're trying to say that you need to be able to, you know, lock onto something, but you need to also be willing to kind of back off of that. So we've given like this far extreme end of, well, I need to have decisive ideas, but I need to make sure that I know if I'm screwed up, I can hear somebody say it, I can think about it, and I can back that off. But you don't want to like over mitigate till you get to the point when your kid can't actually latch onto anything. I mean, it's the same with us in our lives. You're like, well, you're just this purposeless drifter that can't actually hold any ideas. I mean, that's the opposite, right?
Yes. And I think about that the same way I think about, like, you know, you've got kids that are too aggressive and they're bullying. And then you got kids that are too passive and they'll just kind of take whatever. And you're trying to shoot for like the assertive sweet spot in the middle. And that's not like, that's hard. Like that takes some like reps and socializing to develop that skill set.
That's true. That's right. I mean, we're talking kind of the mental side of that, right? The ideation side of it, where you can read a thing. You're not the person who picks up a new book and immediately like, that's 100% correct. Like the old documentary study. Like if you watch a documentary and then you watch a documentary on the opposite opinion of the exact same subject, like some ridiculous percentage of like, well, I think probably that's true. And then the next one you watch, you're like, well, I also think that's probably true. Like you don't want to be so easily persuaded that you're just this weather vane who blows around wherever the last thing you heard is. But you also don't want to be so locked into things that you can't let them go. And so to me, I think the spot is kind of what you're talking about, right? You do encourage kids to take those stances. When a kid reads something new and they get all excited about it and they're like, this is the way, this is like the Mandalorian, like this is the way. You're like, okay, well, let's Socrates you a little bit. Let's just ask a couple of questions and, you know, and let's give you some lived experience to make sure you really think it's the way. And I think most of the time that they'll kind of temper what they learned with a little bit of, I see the perspective there. But I mean, there's a risk they won't. I mean, obviously that happens sometimes too. I mean, if your kids ever just grabbed onto something and they've never come back off of it.
I don't. I mean, besides my daughter and her cell phone, I don't know. Like, I can't really. I mean, my son definitely like he goes from like different. He's into different things, and he pivots off them and like gets into something else that he's like super into. So he hasn't stuck on something yet.
Makes sense. I think I think it's more a feature of kind of late teenagehood. If I just think back at how it was and just looking at my own kids, I think in late teenagehood, you try those things on, right? You try on, because I mean, young people in the sense, like young people, like teens through 20s, you can get pretty far down a rabbit hole. Like it's aggressive. It's something you want to do. I don't know what it is, but when I was young, I was far less inclined to think, well, let's stop and think about this. I was way more inclined to be far more judgmental, far more certain that I was correct with whatever set of data that I had than I am now. And I think, I don't think I'm unique there. I think it's a feature of youth that you just more like that.
It is. And there's like we have like, there's some like, there's one of our like songs says like moderation is for cowards. And I'm like, that is totally like something that like a 22-year-old put in there. And it's like, fuck yeah, moderation's for cowards. You're a coward.
But it feels that way. Like, you want to go read some Ayn Rand, and you go read some Atlas Shrugged, and you're like, yes, absolutely. When you're 20, it's like absolutely objectivism or whatever your flavor of that is, because there's like 1,000 derivatives that are all basically this burn all opposition, this is the way solutions. You're like, it takes a while to just reach the point when you're like, well, okay, maybe we should add a little perspective into this mix. Maybe we should temper that with a little bit of the justice to mercy.
And I think some of it is like, you just got to touch the stove, unfortunately. And so like, it's, as parents, like that's hard to like accept and like surrender to, because you're like, so much of human learning is just through trial and error, that like, you can be like, don't do that, that's bad. Don't do that, that's bad. And then they're still like, they do it. And that was bad, Dad. And you're like, okay, all right, continue on.
But the trouble is, right? And this does take us into some of the other pieces, some of the other risks. Like, let's take neurochemistry, right? Let's take neurochemistry and say, well, we want our kids to be generally kind of balanced. And we could talk about a lot of what we think that means and what the risks are. But a lot of what we're talking about here with you got to let them touch the stove because they learn for themselves. Like, well, what if touching the stove is fentanyl? And you're like, that was too much stove. And that's tough. God, that balance as a parent is so hard between like, well, I want to let my kid walk home from school, but if the kid got hit by a car, I wouldn't like that anymore. Right? That would be like, oh man, that went horribly wrong. And so, man, that's tough to balance. And on the mental health side, that's what we're kind of talking about. Like, what if they join a cult? You're like, you might come out of it a couple of years later, but what if you don't? It's it's tough.
And it definitely, and it bleeds into like the phones, because the same mechanism that they're using to socialize is also the thing that is slowly poisoning them, or they can get into trouble through whatever it is, like body image issues on like looking at Instagram feeds, or bullying, whatever it is on the phone. But they're also socializing in a way that we never did. So how do we and I think just for us as parents, we are in a uniquely shitty position because we're trying to parent in an environment that we did not grow up in. So we're going to like overcorrect on some things, and we're going to undercorrect on some things. And we're not going to know until our kids are like in their late 20s and 30s. And they're like, hey, Dad, that was too strict over here, but you were definitely too loose over here.
Yep. My only consolation is I probably won't be able to hear or think by that point. And so I think I can just like tune it out about, yeah, that's right, sweetie. That's good. I'm glad you're happy.
Well, we'll get you some hearing aids.
It's the upside to SF as dying of cancer in their 50s is, well, you'll never live to actually see the consequences of that. So it's okay. It actually plays out pretty well, right? It's the good side of this, the lighter side of cancer. No, it's true. We could talk we could talk forever about I think some of the risks of phones, and we could get into like the social side of it. We could, I mean, honestly, we have probably a whole episode on social, but when I think of digital device mitigation and the mental health side of it, I guess I specifically just think mentally in terms of like, attention span. I also look at delayed exposure to, let's say, certain concepts. Like I think, I don't know, but I think that probably your odds of becoming a raging porn addict are lower if you are exposed to porn for the first time later in life. I suspect that the earlier you're exposed to any given negative influence you find on the internet, the earlier you encounter it, and the more you encounter it, probably the more serious, your informative years, your brain's that much more malleable. This is just a hypothesis. And to your point a minute ago, like, I don't really know. I didn't grow up with this stuff, so I'm not aware of like how it's going to do it. But I think that my general principle is delay, right? I'm just going to push this back. You can encounter that later in life when you're better able to handle it, and it will have less serious impacts. I think probably the same with like overall device use. That's my hypothesis.
Yes. And so let me just go through Haidt's anxious generation recommendation. So I'm a huge Jonathan Haidt fanboy. I've like read all his books. I think he's really got his finger like on the pulse of just what's happening. Like The Righteous Mind was like very illuminating for our political situation in this country, the differences between, Democrats and Republicans. But he also did The Coddling of the American Mind with a guy, Greg Lukianoff, about college campuses. But the one I want to talk about is his most recent book, The Anxious Generation. And he has 4 specific recommendations for kids that I think are like very simple and like very doable. That kind of speak to what you're talking about there. So, the first one, no smartphones until high school. And that's basically like, hey, he makes the point, like, we're letting kids bring this gigantic distracting device into the classroom with them. Of course they're going to look at it. I mean, it's hard for adults to not be distracted by it.
If I had it in a meeting, I would read it in my meeting. If I was allowed to do that, I would never pay attention in a meeting ever.
So that's the first one. No smartphones before high school. Like, you get them a flip phone or get them like a Gizmo watch, something like that. But there's no reason for a middle school kid. Yes. Yeah. I'm just talking about like some parents, they definitely want that level of connectivity with their kids. The second one, no social media before age 16. And that's just like a simple heuristic that you can go by, and you're going to get all sorts of pushback, but it's just a simple, let their personalities and themselves develop to a point before they start getting out there. Number 3, phone-free schools. So that's just really getting phones out of the classroom. I'm getting like very radical with this. Like, I think we should just go back to like pen and paper. Like, it's really,
I don't see how it's even a discussion. How is it even a conversation?
Yeah. But, and then the last one is, encourage more free play outside, kids playing, unsupervised by adults. And obviously we've talked about that in earlier episodes, but, the idea, yes, there should be adults around if there's like a serious injury, right? But let's let the kids adjudicate their own situations. Somebody doesn't like somebody else, like, let them try to work it out before they, go to an adult, because what that's doing is then breeding, second, third order problems when they start getting out on their own in college.
I mean, that sounds to me like 4 steps to mitigate risk to your kids' brain chemistry. Just right there. I mean, it seems like it's probably not all the way comprehensive, because you got some nutrition, you got some other stuff, but man, that's a pretty solid one. I guess the only thing I would add, the only wrinkle, and I hadn't heard those. I don't think I've heard those before, but the only thing I would add is, as a guy with a large family, like I got lots of kids, and they're spread pretty far apart. I don't like age gates for stuff like that, because what I found is once the first kid does it, the trickle down is pretty much inevitable. Like, once it's in the house, you can't stop it from trickling down pretty quickly all the way to the bottom. Like, so our first kid didn't get to watch TV until he was, I don't remember, like 3 or 4 or something, but his little sister got to watch it earlier, because what's going to happen? She's there. It's getting on. I mean, there's no way to avoid it. So what I would say, I guess I would push back against his limits, is I would say actually no social media in my house at all. and you can do it when you leave the home. Like for us, a lot of the cut lines on digital stuff like that, when you get a smartphone, you're not going to get a smartphone until you leave my house. You're not going to get social media until you leave my house. You're not going to get unrestricted computer use. We have one computer. It's in a place where everybody can see it. You're never going to get the freedom to have any privacy on that until you leave my house. And that may be relatively like nuggish. It's not very nuanced, right? But when you have a huge spread of kids, I don't know that there's another way to do it. And so I'm pretty comfortable saying that I would continue that. I don't think we're going to change on that one. I don't know. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's if you could pull that off, like, good on you. Like, that's definitely I think that's a recipe for. I mean, they're probably not going to be super happy going through it, but I think in the long term, they'll have a better outcome.
No.
So, and I think that's what you care about more. So, yeah, that makes sense.
That's my hope. I mean, hey, if we don't have soda, we have soda at our house. If you didn't have soda at your house, are they still going to get it when they go to a birthday party? Yeah, sure. Are they going to get it when they go to a grandparent's house? Yeah, sure. I feel the same way about a lot of digital media. They're going to see it. You're going to encounter it. I'm not foolish enough to think that I can like hard control the entirety of their experience. But I think by mitigating it, by removing it from the home, I can mitigate a good portion of the negative impacts. That's my hope. I don't know. Maybe I'm dead wrong.
No, I think I mean, it's going to be hard, and I think the danger would be like one of the kids just goes nuts when he gets out of the house. But I mean, the likelihood of that is not, I don't think is super high.
I remember that argument when I was growing up with drinking. I remember there were parents who were like, oh yeah, if you don't let your kid, if you really crack down on them in high school, when they get out there and they can start drinking, man, they're just going to go hog wild. I'll be honest, I didn't find that played out. I think there were kids who did, and there were kids who didn't. Like I went pretty hog wild with beer, but I drank all the way through high school too. So I didn't notice the pattern there, but I didn't notice that people consistently who weren't allowed to drink at home, just went off the deep end or didn't go off the deep end. So I don't actually know.
Right.
I don't know. This might be similar. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
But,
yeah. What else?
Well, that really, to me, so we've talked resilience, we've talked neurochemistry, like neurochemically healthy, we've talked resilient. We want our kids to be pretty good at those two things. We've talked mental flexibility. We want to have the ability to be discerning, right? To go out there and not be afraid to latch onto an idea, but not be afraid to back off that idea too. But to me, I guess the last one I'm going to toss out there, to me, I'm going to call it well-educated. But what I really mean by well-educated is I want my kids to have the opportunity. I want to surprise, what is it? The old thing. You're supposed to surround them with things that are beautiful, true, and good.
Yeah. Those are the transcendentals.
Yeah. And so I want my kids to be surrounded by those things so that when they pick up a thing and they learn it, when they pick up a thing and they study, it will be a thing that has value, whether or not they choose to accept it. Cause man, lots of valuable, good, true, and beautiful things. They're like, this sucks. Like I'm the same way, right? I mean, when I picked up Pride and Prejudice as kids, like this sucks, never reading this again. But they did pick it up and they did experience it. And so when I say well-educated, what I hope is to surround the kids with enough experiences, books. I'm going to straight up I like hard books, and people in conversations that it's going to plant the seeds in their brain that will ideally grow whatever they choose to do with their lives will grow into something worth crap instead of surrounding them with the kind of garbage that might actually just make them worse. Does that make sense? Like I feel like that's where I want to go. And that's kind of the risks that I see in not achieving it.
Yes. And I think that's, you want to expose them to good things and maybe they're not ready. You go to an art museum, they're not paying attention to whatever. You're taking them somewhere nice that costs a lot of money and they really do not care at all. I'm sure you experienced that.
Pretty much guarantee they won't. You pretty much guarantee.
Yeah. I'm sure you experienced a lot of that, when you were like traipsing across Europe with the family.
You don't know disappointment until you take your kids to like Versailles. You're like, oh man, Versailles. Can you imagine going to Versailles as a kid or like skiing in Poland or something? Because I mean, we lived in Europe, so it's relatively easy to do that. You just get in the Honda Odyssey, you drive to Poland, you ski. But you think about it, you're like, man, we used to go like camping down on the river next to our house. And that was like primo. That was a good time. That was a great time. They're like, drive 2 hours to the beach. You're like, you're in Versailles, and the first thing kids like, I thought it would be bigger. Like, you know what? You shut up. You know what? You just don't tell me that. Just don't ever say that again. Like, you could go back to the room and you can eat a tomato, a cheese pizza and experience no culture, but just quietly do it. And don't tell me because it was so much ass pain to get you here. So yes, 100%. I agree with you. Kids never appreciate that stuff. But I will say that years later, because we lived there for like 4 years, years later, I have had kids come back and say, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. Like, I don't remember you enjoying it at the time. I am glad that there's some kind of return on this investment, because at the time, all I felt like was this one went in the toilet and it was a waste of my money.
And I think
you've never experienced that.
Yeah. And I think that gets back to the exposing piece, is that like, we don't totally know when it'll hit them, but the hope is that you'll get an experience like you had with your kids where they give you that feedback.
Or what'll hit them. Because that's the other piece of it, right? I don't want to pretend that I'm going to, the one thing being a parent taught me is that I can't pick what my kids are going to enjoy. They have no ability to do that. They just enjoy what they enjoy, right? I mean, we cast stuff in front of them. You kind of hope they'll bite on something you like. Otherwise, you have to go do all the things that you don't want to do, right? You don't want your kid activities to be things you hate. Otherwise, it makes parenting pretty miserable. But we do like to kind of throw these seeds out there and see which ones are going to grow. And I'd like to hope that we can pitch a broad enough section of really positive options out there. Like, so let's say you're the kind of person that's like, no, my kids have to go to college. I want them to be a doctor or a lawyer. Some people get really kind of ambitious in the social status there sort of way. And like, what if your kid just wants to be in the trades? So I think as parents, we have to be broad enough to say, well, there's a lot of positive outcomes. Let's not define the criteria for success so narrowly that the kid feels like he has to do it that way. But at the same time, you do want to help the kid kind of, latch onto something at some point and kind of move toward it. And so that sweet spot, I think, is what we're really talking about on this kind of educated side. Like, how do you present those opportunities for your kid? How do you ensure that they know they have access to kind of see all of the things that they could do, learn all the things they could learn, and then help them capitalize on it? Does that make sense?
Yes. And yeah, and I think that's all you can do is just, whether they're playing sports or they're doing new experiences, that's all you can do. And then you can obviously observe them and say, oh, hey, I think, you seemed like you enjoyed this more than this. And you can try to gently, encourage them, kind of like like a gardener cultivating some plants. But like at the end of the day, they have their own like path to walk. So all we can do is kind of just try to facilitate them on that path.
It's like never has a gardener had bitchier plants. Never has a gardener had just plants. They're like, come on, plants. I mean, really, is it that bad to get watered and fertilized? Because you just
ungrateful plants.
How about just be quietly ungrateful? I would handle quietly ungrateful plants. Like, that's fine. I could pretend. Like we've discussed earlier, I could fantasize to a degree that things are going better than they are. But man, you just throw in my face. It's hard to do. No, actually, the kind of fruit, which you continue the gardening thing, right? So the fruit of a lot of this conversation is I did have my oldest kid. He don't live here anymore, right? So he's out of the house. He's come back and he said, the 3 books that have shaped my life are the books, some of these books you introduced to me. And honestly, I've handed him tons of books to read. So our kids, a lot of them homeschool. I hand them books and like, hey, when you look like you're bored, you're going to read this book and you're going to tell me about it. And that's my small, tiny contribution to ultimately my wife's giant load of educating our children. But the boy came back to me and he's like, so these 3 books, Dad. So, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then a book by a guy named Michael Beizell called Extreme Privacy. He's like, those 3 books have shaped who I wish to be. I'm like, man, a little tear for the old man. Like, it worked. The plan worked. Okay.
Excellent.
Every once in a while, right? One of those rare moments in parenting where you're like,
yes,
cool. But we want to achieve that. We want to achieve that same impact because he read hundreds of books, but those 3 were the ones that really just resonated. Those 3 are the ones that are like, this is me. This helps define me. This is who I want to be. My daughter could not be more different, but we've also thrown her, hundreds of books. And I think that and the experiences that support them and the interactions that they have, my hope is that that's that educated thing that I'm really striving for. And the risks are that obviously you're going to miss the one, you're going to miss the critical thing, right? I mean, the FOMO, right? You're going to miss handing them the thing that's actually going to light them up, and they won't have that opportunity. Or I guess the other one is that your kids just won't gravitate to any of it. But I haven't had that experience. I don't know.
And that, like, it's great to hear you say how much they're reading, because I'm definitely struggling right now. Like, my youngest, the 5-year-old, is freaking teaching herself to read right now. It's crazy. But the other ones, I'm struggling to get them, encouraging them to read. And it's like, yeah, cool. We're transitioning to like a visual culture, video. Great. And yes, there are long form podcasts, absolutely, and long form content that somebody can engage with, right? Like, you can watch a 3-hour lecture on something on YouTube, right? But I worry that, we're losing the depth that books provide. So it's good to hear that your kids are so into them.
I think we've had kids that came to reading later and kids that came to reading earlier, I guess more or less naturally, but we did at least hit pay dirt with all the kids at one point or another, was something they just really enjoyed reading. And that acted as kind of the gateway drug to a lot of the other stuff. I think, there's a lot of stuff with like undiagnosed dyslexia. There's kids that just kind of come to reading harder than others. And I think there's a risk, we talk about risk. There's a risk that you can actually just discourage the kid. You can fail to develop that level of learning. The kids can just hate it. They can have an association with failure and sucking too, associated with it. And obviously that's the thing we really want to avoid. But I don't know, everything from like Dogman graphic novels to stuff that just like helped, our little guys who were less enthusiastic kind of catch up with the ones that are more. And I think all the kids really like reading now. But maybe we don't have any devices, so they don't have a choice, right? Like, it's like you'll play with a stick if it's the only thing you got.
Yeah, that's the secret. That is the secret.
Boredom. Boredom does create a lot of solutions to parent. Hey man, if they're bored enough, they'll do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Very nice.
I don't know if that's valid, but how are we going to bring this guy home, man? Because we're getting close to the end, but I do feel that we covered mentally where we'd like our kids to go, right? We want them to be, resilient. We want them to be able to hit challenges. We want them to be able to query an agent, get kicked in the junk, and be able to ready to query another agent the next day. Like, yep, got it. That sucked. I'm going to flip that around and we're just going to do it again. It's fine. But also we want them to be the sort of people who can cast the net and go find information, who can go look for information, who can and then take a position based on the information that they uncover. You're like, all right, I see what's out in the world. That's what I want to be. I'm going to go be that. Oh, wait. Actually, I don't. That's not working out. Let's tweak. Maybe we got to just go back and restart. We want them to have that kind of flexibility. So a combination of decisiveness, but also the flexibility and the humility to be able to say, I'm wrong. I'm sucking there. We want them to be mentally healthy. We want their chemistry to be straight. We want to try our best to prevent them from accumulating the kind of brain scar tissue early on that's going to make them unable to function later, right? Like I do kind of fear for long-term attention span. Of it's kind of what you talked about a minute ago. Like I fear that if that's lost, I don't know. Does it grow back? Like if you never develop it, will you develop it later in life?
Right. Or is it just a different kind of attention? I try to avoid the there's like a phrase, any technology created before you were 35 is new and exciting, and anything after age 35 is like terrifying and destroying the world. So I'm like I'm trying to like strip away my own bias and be like, okay, a lot of this will probably buff out. It'll probably be good. But at the same time, like we have to, like, attention is a muscle that we have to train. And I think, and humans have had to deal with it. Distractions, it wasn't just like the smartphone era, like humans have had distractions. So I think there's a moderate path that we can, train our attention, even in this technological age.
So I don't think you're wrong. And I think it's easy to jump to conclusions, but it's also just as easy to jump to oh, well, you're just scoffing at it because, you're over 35 and this is a new technology. But for every situation where, things do buff out, almost everything buffs out, like being full of microplastics buffs out in a sense, but it doesn't mean that it's not worse than it was. It also doesn't mean that everything is automatically worse than it was. So I try not to fall into the trap of either one, assuming everything new is bad, or the opposite, that every new condition is, this miracle cure-all that's going to fix everything. And actually everything that it's replacing is just wasn't worth having anyway, because we got to be careful, right? We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's good to live in whatever we're in, not the modern, the postmodern, the metamodern, the ultramodern era, whatever the hell it is. It's good to live there, and it has a lot of positives, right? But it doesn't mean that a lot of the things that used to come from, like, living in a small town and never leaving that small town, like, there's a lot of positive there. Like, I just started Tribe, the book that that you wanted me to write, you recommended. A lot of that feels like danger of getting lost, and attention span feels like one of those things to me. Like, yes, new technology is amazing, it's great. The new way that people consume data is very broad, right? You can get a mile wide, even if you're only an inch deep. But I do have concerns, like on the relationship and the knowledge sense that, well, if you never get deep, isn't that objectively something lost that has value? I mean, I think
it is. And again, like I love reading, I love writing. So it's kind of like, I had this Master Chief that was like into bench pressing, and he was like, everybody needs to bench press their body weight 20 times. and I did like 19 and a half, and I was like, so just embarrassed. But so like, I don't want to be like him with like bench pressing about like reading. But I do agree with you that I think that's something's being lost now. And I'm not convinced that what it's being replaced with is an improvement.
And I think it's okay for us to be the people in society who are just like waving the flag that this is in danger of being lost. It doesn't mean automatically, right? You're going to get a million flag wavers in every direction saying the sky is falling on everything. But it doesn't mean that it's not okay to have those people around the periphery, right? It's not just because it's not the hotness now, or just because it might not be 100% correct. It's all right to kind of pull people back in that direction, or at least have somebody saying, hey, caution, cliff ahead. This is a thing we should be looking out for. So I think we should, you're right, be, not just curmudgeonly as hell and say, hey man, it just sucks. Everything's going to hell. And what is a 60-second clip anyway? You can't even express a thought in 60 seconds. Like, how are you supposed to do that? You need at least like 2-3 minutes to have a clip.
I can't even clear my throat in 60 seconds.
Right. So there's a sweet spot between being those people and also just like, books, what the hell? You can't even sell them anymore. You can't, it is funny. I can't get rid of an old book. I can't give it to the library. I can't take it to the store. You can't really. Oh,
I'll take
maybe you can sell it.
I am assembling. Yes. I'm going to build a stone library in the woods. I might go like, so Carl Jung built a stone tower next to this lake. And I'm like, dude, I am doing that. I'm building a stone tower, and I'm going to fill it with books. Cause it's gotta be, I don't want it to get burned down. That's like I want it to be like a repository. So once like we get full on idiocracy status, somebody will be able to come, nobody will be able to read, but they'll be like, look at all these books. It's crazy.
Exactly. They'll be wiping their ass with them because at least it's a steady stash of paper, right? Like, hey, look at this guy. He's got this great toilet paper. Some of them got pictures on him.
Starting fires.
Yeah. Oh man. So you're going to build a tower and fill it full of books in the forest, and you're going to grow long Jesus hair and a beard. Like, I feel like somebody's been playing the Wizard in Dungeons and Dragons a little too often.
It is
That's
possible.
what I think you are.
You know what? So I have never played a wizard. I've always been warriors or rogues. Like, those are my two go-tos. So,
That's what it says about you.
I need to play a wizard at some point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Man, we just lost whatever cool points we had. Cool points gone, man. Just gone.
So I'm in training. Like, I'm gonna be a game master. I'm definitely I will take up the charge of being a game master at some point.
Unabashedly, we could talk at another episode. I actually think that that board games, role playing games, like, I think when you look at balancing that against like video games in house, huge dividends in terms of like socialization, intellectual pursuit, like quality of conversation, quality of family time. Like I'm actually a huge advocate. I think that they're a wonderful influence on families, but that's we're pretty late in the game to be starting a topic that broad. We'll have to do it another time.
No, I like that. That's a good, maybe we can do that in the social episode.
How ironic would it be to spend a social section of a podcast talking about Dungeons and Dragons? Because it's like the least social thing. I mean, at least when I was growing up, man, there's nothing more antisocial than Dungeons and Dragons. Like, what's wrong with you? Like,
my middle school used to have, like, there'd be like the dance was going on, and then they would have like Dungeons and Dragons like in a classroom that like people would go to. I would go back,
but just informally, right? Because the people who weren't invited to the dance went to them. I mean, it just played out naturally, right?
They were invited, but they just wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. So I was in both worlds. I was like asking girls to dance, getting rejected, and then going to the Dungeons and Dragons room.
It's like pre-agent training right there. It's prep for life.
Shut down, access denied. All right, go play Dungeons and Dragons.
There it is. Path to success. I think that's mental health right there. We've just put a cherry on this Sunday. Dude, I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, man. That was a good conversation.
You too, brother.
Look forward to talking about next week. We're due spiritual. I think we can dig into spiritual. I'm curious to see where that goes, man.
Yeah, we definitely can. That's good.
Dude, let's talk it. Hey, catch you later, man. Enjoy your weekend.